Welcome to Second Saturday Conversation. Here we explore Christianity in and for the 21st century. And our conversations, our concerns are not so much about doctrine and dogma or beliefs, as if those are the weight-bearing walls of Christianity. I'd say we're more concerned with knowing more about Jesus and his vision for the world and what he felt was possible in a world of violence and fear and domination and exploitation and a tendency to think about us and them. Jesus had a very different sense of what was possible for us and what it means to live in the world together. So our sense is that Christianity has more to do with the democratization of humanity. We care about humanity here. And we also explore what we think we're talking about when we talk about God. You know, God is a word symbol. So we also are concerned with that name, what we mean by it, and what's going on in the name of God. And we're also concerned about the future, and even a future that won't be ours. We hold that Christianity, that the heart of Christianity still beats and even sings. And one of the questions that we've been asking this year is, can we hear the music? Do you hear the music? I also want to add that our conversations here on Second Saturday also address what John Keats called negative capability. And negative capability is when our capacity to be uncertain, to live with uncertainties and mysteries and doubts without, as he puts it, any irritable reaching after fact and reason. So negative capability is when we're capable of being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact or reason. So I wonder how we're doing. Today, I'm going to offer a brief reflection on our past program year. Our program year runs from September until June. We take July and August off. We will begin again in September with a new program year. And this year's overall theme has been Skylight and Seasoned Tongue and Groove. And that's an image from a poem by Seamus Heaney. So I will do a brief review of where we've been this year, and then I look forward to inviting your thoughts as well. Jeff Creswell, my friend and colleague, do you want to orient us to the plenary time and how to use the raising your hand and all of that? Good morning,
Jeff. Sure. Hi, Marianne. Good morning. We are glad to have you back from Japan.
Oh, I'm very glad to be back. Thank you very, very much. It was a fascinating trip, and I'm glad to be home.
Yeah, we're glad.
I'm straightening out my hair here for just a moment.
So our plenary time is the opportunity for you to interact with Marianne, to ask her questions, to share a wondering that you have. And the way that we handle that is that if you have something you would like to contribute, that you would go down to the bottom menu bar in Zoom and look for the reactions. And if you click on reactions, you'll see an opportunity to raise your hand. It'll put a little hand up in your video, and then we'll know that you would like to speak, and we'll be calling on the people whose hands are raised. We ask that you keep your comment to about 2 minutes so that we give other people the opportunity to share what they would like to share and to have that time to work with and interact with Marianne. So we can talk about that again when we're about ready to start, Marianne.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks, Jeff. I'm going to go through our year month by month. And one reason that I'm going to do that is that if there's a session that either you missed or that you want to return to, we post all of our second Saturday conversations on the Marcus J. Borg website. So you can always go to the website and see again our sessions here on second Saturday. And I encourage you to do that. It's a wonderful resource, and it's also, you can use that as an opportunity to use parts of it for discussion in your own communities and small groups and conversation with one another. So Skylight and Seasoned Tongue and Groove, those became really operative metaphors, a skylight and seasoned tongue and groove, as we moved through the year. But let me begin by saying just a little bit about the music that precedes our program time. From 9:15 to 9:30, that's Pacific time, the first 15 minutes before we start, I've selected several pieces of music that are really intentional. And I just want to remind people what they are. Not everybody comes in at 15 minutes ahead of time to listen to the music. And of course, on the website, we can't play the music for copyright reasons, but I want you to know what has preceded our programming this year as a kind of, in a sense, a kind of overture. The first piece of music that I selected was Bobby Dylan's "The Times They Are A-Changing." And that was written in 1963, I think was when that was. And it's true then and true now. The times, they are changing. That was followed by Bradley Cooper singing, "Maybe It's Time to Let the Old Ways Die." Maybe it's time to let the old ways die. And then Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper singing together, "Shallow." And part of the verses in "Shallow" is, "We're far from the shallow now. We're in the deep end." And I think here on second Saturday, we move away from the shallow into the deep. So we're far from the shallow now. And that's followed by the late Fran McKendry, who sings a song by Stephen Curtis Chapman, "Are You Waiting for Lightning?" One of the refrains there is, "Are you waiting for lightning? Are you listening for thunder? Signs that it's time for a change?" I would say that this is time for a change. And part of that song also says, here you are at sort of the edge of things, sort of reevaluating what you've believed. And now what? How do we move forward? Okay. But are you waiting for lightning? Are you listening for thunder? Signs that it's time for a change. There are many signs that it is time for a change. And then the last piece of music right before our programming begins, it's a little less than 2 minutes, and it's from the Oppenheimer movie. And in this less than 2 minutes, this particular piece, which is really kind of fascinating, it's got lots of movement in it, it changes tempo 21 times in 2 minutes, less than 2 minutes. And interestingly enough, the title of that piece is called "Can You Hear the Music?" And that has also been a bit of a theme this year, as I mentioned in my opening, that part of our question to ourselves is, can we hear the music amidst the hurdy-gurdy and busyness of life and the cacophony of all kinds of things? Can we hear the music? Okay. So those are the musical selections that have preceded our programming this year. And as I said, it's kind of an overture. It kind of sets a kind of tone. They're all about change. And sort of the call to us to live through this change and be part of it. So let me say a little bit about our first session in September. I actually titled that first session, Lions, Bears, and Perfume, Jesus and Dangerous Memory, Skylight, and Seasoned Tongue and Groove, all three of those. And I remember saying to my wonderful web person, you know what, maybe I think that should be the title for the whole year. And she said, too long. I don't think so. And so we ended up having it be Skylight and Seasoned Tongue and Groove, which actually sort of comprehended a number of things that I was sort of hoping to get to this year. But let me mention to you why those three things were in my opening session, and thinking that these were themes that we would follow. Let me remind you about Lions, Bears, and Perfume. I borrowed a story from in a wonderful and important book called After Jesus, Before Christianity. It's put out by the West Star Institute, which is perhaps best known for their work with the Jesus Seminar. But I borrowed this story from After Jesus, Before Christianity. It's about Thecla, who was a first-century companion of Paul. She was a radical. She was encouraging women and men not to marry, but to join herself and Paul in wandering and healing and teaching. And this was not looked upon favorably. Roman soldiers were called upon to seize her. They did. They stripped her and put her in an arena and released lions and bears. And they were all ready to have Thecla be devoured by them. Well, there were hundreds of women in the arena who showed up, according to the story, and they threw perfume in the arena. And as the story goes, the animals got drowsy, lost their appetite, sort of fell asleep, were just lazy, and Thecla escaped. I love that story. And I wanted to use that story as a kind of analog or a kind of representation for the possible effects of theopoetics. Now, that's a topic that we've been exploring this year, reflecting on what is it not, why is it important. We'll continue to explore theopoetics. But by the way, theopoetics for me is not a destination. It's not like we all should become, theopoetical in our theology or whatever. One of my interests in theopoetics is that it's an alternative kind of discourse. It's an alternative discourse that calls on imagination and is more inviting and evocative than it is proclamatory. Okay. And I think that theopoetics, in these times of change, where we're not exactly sure what is going to emerge and so forth, to have a kind of discourse that invites negative capability, if you will, that suggests possibilities, that imagines and reimagines in its own language. It's a kind of language, it's a kind of thinking, it's a kind of writing. I think we need that today as kind of a counter to a lot of our propositional thinking, propositions that actually are not holding up so well anymore. So in choosing this story about Thecla and the bears and the lions and this perfume, I was kind of curious about the idea of even theopoetics or something else being a kind of perfume that can fell violence and terror. Okay. Because Thecla's experience, throwing her naked into the arena with lions and bears, it was to devour her, annihilate her. And yet this perfume that the women threw into the arena changed that whole situation. And one of my questions is, what is the quote unquote perfume that can fell violence and terror and hatred and fear? What is it? What's stronger than that? And I thought that the Thecla story was a nice little parable that might play with those ideas. Okay. So that's where why I chose that story on the very first session about lions, bears, and perfume. The other topic that I referred to in our first session in September was Johann Betz's Johann Baptist Betz, who is a Betz, Metz, M-E-T-Z, who is a Catholic theologian, his idea of Jesus as dangerous memory. And Metz talks about dangerous memory in terms of those who have been unjustly killed or those who have been martyred for a just cause. And, a victim, by the way, is in the wrong place at the wrong time. A martyr stands for something. And Metz talks about Jesus as being a dangerous memory for empire, a dangerous memory for the status quo, because he embodied and not only represented, but was a different way of being in the world and being in a domination system. He said there is another way to live and be with one another. So Jesus' vision for Metz is part of a dangerous memory that we continue to strive for, that we continue to say, no, what he was about mattered, and it still matters for us. And whether it's Jesus or the just cause of anyone who has been unjustly killed, that for us to say, maybe it didn't happen then, but we're still going to carry this into our present and future in the hopes that we can make it happen now. So the notion of dangerous memory, I just find that provocative language, that Jesus is dangerous memory. And I was intrigued with that idea, that and how it can fuel our hope, striving for something more than the status quo. We haven't done a whole lot with that this year, but I did note Metz's phrase, Jesus as dangerous memory, and am intrigued with that. The third image that I drew upon in our first session was from a poem by Seamus Heaney. We post that at the end of our session, called Skylight. And the image that I drew from that poem was skylight and seasoned tongue and groove. Skylight as being an opening or a clearing, something that helps us see a broader horizon. And seasoned tongue and groove as sort of representing what we've established, our own constructions, what, by necessity to keep us safe and firm and established and all of that. But that a skylight can open our sense of possibility, that rather than just being content in our tightly closed lid trunk feeling, that a skylight reminds us that there is so much more that we know not of, and that there are other possibilities out there. And I consider Skylight as kind of an important reminder to us to keep our minds open, our hearts open, our imaginations open to what can yet be. So those were some thoughts that, let me just see here. I'm looking at one thing I wanted to mention about Betts that I had not mentioned. Metz says that his definition of religion is that religion is an interruption. And I find that really interesting. Religion is an interruption. Now, there are many, many ways to define religion and what is the impulse behind religion. I actually think it's for a better world and a better world here. But Metz considers religion an interruption. And that's related to this notion of dangerous memory, that it can interrupt the status quo, convention, our presuppositions, and open up other possibilities. And then, as I said, that's kind of related to the notion of Skylight too, something that interrupts our taken for granted assumptions about our limits, about our comforts, about that in which we live and move and have our being. Skylight opens all of that. So perhaps that's enough said about my first session that I hinted at lions, bears, and perfume. I introduced the notion of dangerous memory and the notion of Skylight and seasoned tongue and groove. I also want to mention that in Seamus Heaney's poem, the Skylight was also made the person who was in this room and was resisting Skylight, but when the Skylight was put in, he said he felt like the man who was paralyzed with palsy, that it healed him. And I'm really intrigued with that image, that Skylight can also be a healing element in our imagination, that it can free us from some of our paralysis, that there's something about opening up to new possibilities and new ideas that can be liberating. And so I like that suggestion that in the poem that the man actually felt healed because of the presence and openness of the Skylight. Okay. In October, we had a guest, Scott Holland, and I invited Scott to come because he knows all about theopoetics. He teaches theopoetics and writing at Bethany College. Bethany and Earlham School of Religion have a joint program. It's probably the only program in the States that has a master's in theopoetics. He is a pastor, he's a professor, he's a peacemaker, he's an author. And I invited Scott Holland to come to reflect on theopoetics. What is it? Why is it important? So that session was on October 14th, and I encourage you to return to that and revisit the conversation that we had with Scott. I also want to mention that October 14th, we had a partial eclipse of the sun that day in this part of the world. I live on the West Coast. And I would suggest that in some ways we've been in a partial eclipse of the light this entire year. But I just realized, I just note that October 14th, we had a partial eclipse of the sun, and 7 days prior on October 7th was the beginning of the war between Israel and Gaza, Israel and Hamas, and that continues today, and that has been something that has been with us this entire year, the raging of that war. Let me mention a couple of things that Scott said as reminders. He said, religion is imaginative before it is propositional. Religion is imaginative before it is propositional. Amos Wilder, who's one of the people who was involved in theopoetics when it was emerging in the 60s, he said, before the message, the vision, before the prose, the poem, before the sermon, the hymn. So I think when Scott says religion is imaginative before it is propositional, there's something else that is stirring, something else that gives spark to propositions or the message or the sermon. But it's that thing that stirs underneath and from the depths, and that addresses the depths, that is what theopoetics, for instance, is interested in. Scott also said, we are able to live only what we are capable of imagining. We are able to live only what we are capable of imagining. He goes on to say, reason can only follow the paths that are first broken open by imagination. Okay. I think many of us put reason as the leader of our thought. Scott suggests otherwise. He said reason can only follow the paths that are first broken open by imagination. And he insists that theology must be grounded in human reality and not in some metaphysical schema, not in some duality of its, that something of the forms, something more abstract, that's really where the ultimate reality is. No, ultimate reality is grounded in human reality. I think that's an interesting comment too. And in discussing theopoetics, he emphasizes that imagination and experience are primary. They are primary. In theology, it tends to be a certain kind of logic and propositional thinking. Theopoetics in its own way could be considered a critique of classical theology and its tendency to absolutize and to fix. And our task is not so much to escape the anguish and complexities of our lives, but to live them. And Scott suggests that theopoetics addresses that in its language and in the way that it invites reflection. Scott reminds us that theology is not chiefly exposition or interpretation of creeds and ideas and the Bible, but imaginative construction, that theology is imaginative construction. And theopoetics reminds theology of that reality, that theology is an imaginative construction, and that we are at a time where we need to reimagine and reconstruct our theologies. Okay, that was October. Scott Holland. In November, I took on Theopoetics and Creativity, and I borrowed from the work of Gordon Kaufman. Gordon Kaufman suggests that rather than personhood, that God is creativity. To not think of God so much as creator, That's more anthropomorphic. But that God is creativity, that God is creating. And he's part of a discipline called constructive theology. So is Jack Caputo, which is they are interested in how to reimagine how to understand the symbol of God in today's world. And Kaufman's that thought experiment is that God is creativity. And it's interesting that theopoiesis, as we've been discussing theopoetics, poiesis means to create, to make. So what might it mean that God is that which creates and makes? Kaufman says that the universe is not a permanent structure, but it is an ongoing, and this is one of his phrases, serendipitous creating. Serendipitous creativity is a phrase of Gordon Kaufman's to address this marvel of not just change, not just that everything changes, but that there is something in God, in creativity, that is novel, that creates something novel, something not yet understood, something not yet seen, which also might be related to Jack Caputo's sense of the event, of something that is coming that eye has not seen nor ear heard, but can change everything. Okay, so there, for Kaufman, there's something about God and novelty that he thinks is important. He also says that consciousness didn't create the universe, but that consciousness came with human life, okay, and that it evolves, that consciousness evolves. And he has a very interesting notion that ideas like love and evil are actually human constructions. They are human constructions. And that, for instance, the notion of loving our enemy is an evolutionary development of human life. The notion to love our enemy. And I hope our evolutionary development continues to go in that direction. I find Gordon Kaufman's work interesting and challenging, and he invites us to reimagine how we use the word, the God symbol. And so that November session, when I played with stuff from Gordon Kaufman, I don't know how well I did it, but I just want to remind you that Kaufman's thought experiment is that God is creativity. I think that's just interesting for us to consider and reflect upon. In December, we had Brandon Scott and Jack Caputo as our guests, and I actually asked them to talk about Jesus as dangerous memory, and they didn't do that. But and that's a session, the December second Saturday, that I think is worth going back to listen to Jack and Brandon reflect together on what they think is important about Jesus, how they talk about Jesus in our current context and in the context of biblical criticism and biblical study today. Let me mention a couple of things very briefly that Jack said about Jesus. Jack said, Jesus is not a concept. He is an intuition about the nature and character of God. He is the poet, and God is the poem. And Jack says, you know, they may have killed the poet, but they can't kill the poem. That's also related, I think, to dangerous memory. Brandon says, hello, little boy. Brandon says that this is my beloved Theo, and actually Theo's full name is Theopoetics. So this is Theopoetics in the flesh. Let me mention what Brandon said. He suggests that our task concerning Jesus Cindy, do you want to go down and get your ball? Go ahead, go down, get your ball. Is deconstruction. That our task today is to unbind Jesus and Christianity, for that matter, from the fetters of tradition. And he said, when religion becomes literalized, that's when the trouble begins. They both responded to my question, why is Jesus important, or is Jesus important? They both said, well, not only is he one of the most influential figures in human history, but he moves us away from propositions to possibilities. He moves us away from propositions to possibilities. So for them, Jesus, the importance of Jesus isn't about belief, but it's about the possibilities that he holds forth then and now as to how we can live and that things can be done another way. Both Jack and Brandon say that Christianity needs to be reimagined and reinvented. In February, we had a guest, Belden Lane. Belden is a nature mystic. He's a wonderful author. He's got some beautiful books. He talked about the importance of nature and our experience of nature. What was so nice about having Belden is that, we tend to sort of dance around with thought ideas a lot here, but he helped to bring us back to the importance of our experience of nature, our being part of nature, our participation in nature, that nature is a window into ultimate reality, and how we have broken that great conversation between us and the natural world. And he had some lovely stories and reflections, and you all had wonderful response to Belden. You shared some of your own experiences with nature that sort of were their own skylights in a way that opened up your own sense of what is this in which we live and move and have our being, and that encounters with nature are their own kind of apertures. And there's something about Belden's session also that I think addresses my concern about what is stronger than terror and violence. But it's paradoxical that nature itself can often be terrorizing and violent and destructive. But Belden helps us to see that phrase of Rudolf Otto's, the mysterium tremendum et fascinans, that deep mystery that allures, it makes us tremble. But what dazzles most deeply is the wonder in it all. And I think that Belden helped us to remember that that's a really important part of Second Saturday conversation, to remember our place in the natural world and our relationship to it. And as he said, to re-engage that great conversation. This reminds me of a poem by Shalane Harkin. It's called The Worst Thing. And she says, the worst thing we ever did was put God in the sky, out of reach, pulling the divinity from the leaf, sifting out the holy from our bones, insisting God isn't bursting dazzlement through everything we've made, to put in a cloud man elsewhere. So I think that the worst thing we ever did was put God in the sky, as a kind of supernatural theism, that God is somehow somewhere out there, and in doing that pulls divinity out of the leaf, sifts out the holy from our bones, and whereas God's dazzlement is everywhere. And Belden helped remind us of that too. In March and April, I shared my sense that we need more poetics than dogmatics. And but what I want to highlight from those two sessions is my quoting Ruth Ben-Ghiat. I think I did this in March. She is a professor. She is an expert on fascism. She's a history professor. She's written a book called Strongmen. She's an expert on totalitarian government. And she commented that, and I quoted her, that language can change the way we think and feel. Language can change the way we think and feel. And Scott Holland and Jack and Brandon and Belden, I think, would agree. And this is something that I'm interested in and that I think is important, how we use language. And language is power. She said, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, Ghiat, Ben-Ghiat, she says, we must resist the perversion of language and the destruction of meaning. We must resist the perversion of language and the destruction of meaning. You know, when I think about Jesus talking about the kingdom of God, which, by the way, I don't think is a place, I think it's a way of being. But when I think of how, for instance, the Christian right has perverted that understanding of the kingdom of God and destroyed the meaning of Jesus' own vision and ministry. When I think of how the Christian right is doing that, I think of it as a kind of perversion of language and vision. And Ruth Ben-Ghiat warns us that to distort the dangerous memory of possibility and hope is a tool of totalitarianism. She writes that the most valuable response, this is, I'm quoting her, to the tragedies and oppression come from the creative realms of art, performance, poetry. The evocative power of poetry, and I would say of lyric language and theopoetic language and so forth, has a unique function, she writes, of redeeming language in situations where language is being abused and also stripped of its meaning. The healing power of language shapes us and history. And I think this is a really important point. And as I said earlier, why I'm interested in theopoetics, because it's an alternative discourse to the kind of discourse that is capturing the imagination today. Okay. So I encourage you to maybe go back to, I think it's March's session when I quoted Ruth Ben-Ghiat, or we posted her website. She has a blog called Lucid, and her book, Strongmen, Strongmen from Mussolini to the Present, is really an important conversation for us to be part of. In May, my dear friend Jeff gave you all beautiful space and spaciousness to engage in two poems, The Way It Is by William Stafford and the poem The North Star. And these are two wonderful metaphors to play with. And I'm just so grateful that he was with you in the way that he was, and that he drew you out to reflect on that thread that runs through our being, and the North Star that is a kind of compass for our values. And that conversation, I think, is reflective of what Second Saturday has become, which is a real community of heart and soul and thought and mind. And my sense is that those of us who gather here on Second Saturdays, that, you know, we're more about deepening meaning and not necessarily resolving the mysteries and mayhem of the world, but we're about wanting to deepen the meaning and the wonder, and have deep speak to deep, the depth dimension of our life together. And my conviction is that that in deepening our efforts, that we'll come upon an affirmation that makes the risk of life worth the living. I mean, it's life itself. So, you know, from Lions, Bears, and Perfume, and Jesus and Dangerous Memory, and Skylight, and Season, Tongue, and Groove, these are things that we started the year with, that I started the year with, and then they've sort of unfolded in their own way throughout the year. And I think that some of the things we've addressed is the power of language, the promise of possibilities, what really is it to be human, what is going on in the name of God, sort of the wonder of, I mean, the fact that we are here at all. And so we come together to reflect on these things, explore these things, and then wonder how Christianity addresses all of this. And what our part is in having Christianity actually help us to sing a song in a strange land. So I want to turn to you to, in our plenary time, I'd love to hear from you sort of what you note about this year and about your journey this year, or what you want to say to your fellow Second Saturday Conversation travelers, something that you want to say to them, or, you know, where you find yourself now, or how we're doing with negative capability. And one of the things I've loved about Second Saturday is that I don't think we as a people here are full of argument. But to borrow that wonderful line from Mary Oliver's poem about when death comes, that we're striving more to be brides married to amazement, bridegrooms taking the world into our arms. And we're helping each other to be in that kind of openness and sense of hope and possibility with eyes wide open. So I'd love to move into plenary time. And actually, I think maybe what we should do, because this will also give you another minute to think. I'm going to read the guidelines, which is part of our hospitality for listening and speaking. I'll read through those guidelines quickly. I noticed that a number of people already have some comments they want to make, but I'll read through these guidelines, and then I'll have Jeff help us to open up the conversation today. So take time to become settled in God's presence. Listen to others with your entire self, senses, feelings, intuition, imagination, rational faculties. Don't interrupt. Pause between speakers to absorb what's been said. Don't formulate what you want to say while someone else is speaking. Okay, that's sort of like, even if it's just in your own mind, it's like talking while somebody else is talking. So don't formulate what you want to say while someone else is speaking. Speak for yourself only, expressing your own thoughts and feelings, referring to your own experiences. Avoid being hypothetical. Steer away from broad generalizations. This is not easy, by the way, I know. Don't challenge what others say. Listen to the group as a whole, to those who've not spoken aloud, as well as to those who have. By the way, I think that overall, we're actually becoming quite sensitive and quite good at all of this, as difficult as these guidelines are. Generally leave space for anyone who may want to speak a first time before speaking a second time yourself. and hold your desires and opinions and even your convictions lightly. Okay. Jeff, do you want to add at all to my prompt for the plenary time? Is there anything else you'd like to name to help people reflect on what this year has been like?
You know, my head is spinning because I'm remembering all these things that you've brought up, Marianne, and I keep turning to Carol and saying, I'd forgotten that. I'd forgotten.
Yeah.
That was a lovely walk through the year, and so many of these ideas have been, I just, it makes me want to go back and watch the past Second Saturdays to refresh my memory, because there's a lot of richness there.
Yeah. And refresh mine too, by the way. So, but it was actually a good exercise for me to think, okay, so, this is the garden we've been walking through in this last year. And so I'm curious to know what is striking folks as we gather for this last time in this program year. We'll meet again on the 14th of September, but what some of your final thoughts might be, and as I said, what you'd like to share with other people who've been on this journey with you this year.
And Marianne, I thought of one other thing that I'd just like to let people know about as they raise their hand to interact. And that is that if you would look at your own video and see the name that comes up on your video, if it says iPad or something like that, or the name of the church that you're using the Zoom link from, it's helpful if you go either click on your name or click on the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner of your video picture. You'll see an option to rename. If you would do that, then when I call on you, I don't have to say, Calvary Church, would you like to speak to Marianne, when I don't know who Calvary Church is. So if you would just rename yourself with the name you would like to be referred to when you're called upon, that would be really helpful. And a quick reminder that we're asking people to keep their comments to 2 minutes. If we go past that time, I'll just put up a finger like this to say it's time to wrap up so that we can give other people an opportunity to speak. Okay, Marianne, I think we're ready.
Great.
Let's begin with Andy Rosane. Andy, do you want to unmute yourself? Andy, are you there? Maybe we'll come back to Andy. It doesn't look like he's there. Jim High. Jim, would you unmute yourself?
Good morning, everyone.
Hi, Jim. Hi.
I want to take us back even further than you reviewed. This past week, I've been cleaning up around the place, and I'm a pack rat when it comes to things I like that I read, and I'll stack them aside, and then I go back through them. And I went through 4 hours of old stuff the other day and threw away about half of it. But I ran across your notice of our meeting that was on the second Saturday of April.
Okay.
And it had the title of the meeting as "Does Religion Have a Future?
Mm-hmm.
Does Christianity?"
Mm-hmm.
And I thought you were not really asking for a yes or no question, because those two questions can't be answered yes or no. Just like when we say the word God, we can't just accept it from somebody because we don't know what they mean by that word. And our whole existence is coming more and more and more and more into the realization of the ultimate reality that we live in. And yet the church is still living in a reality that occurred 2,000 years ago. And I was so depressed recently when I was watching TV and somebody was talking about how fast things are moving. And they said, well, but there is a research firm that goes out and tries to follow public opinion on a regular basis. And that year after year after year, and still today, roughly 25% of the people in this country still think the sun goes around the earth.
Yeah.
And I just thought, surely to God, and I didn't mean to use that word, surely in our ultimate reality, they don't really think that. They can't. But it just shows that that what a charge we have.
Yeah.
And I'll say one other thing. The church needs to be saved.
Huh.
Because it's a benefit to humanity to have people come together and do good. And that brings up my topic that I've said, we don't come together and worship God. We come together and put an extra zero in his name and do good.
Yeah.
And I would like to see us in the future try to emphasize the answer to those two questions that you asked us back in April of 2022. Because I think it's important that we get on. I don't go to church. I can't go to church. I'd have to get up and walk out when I hear some of the stuff they do. I would have to stay seated when they do the Apostles' Creed. So let's work on changes that need to be made.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great, Jim. And I shouldn't be surprised that I heard you say church needs to be saved. But I love what you are saying, that no, as people that come together and, do good, love kindness, walk humbly, that we need community. We need one another. And
I loved your sermon that you posted a while back, that from the church where you preached the sermon. That was a wonderful sermon.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah.
Mm.
So, and yes, does religion have a future? Does Christianity? Well, it remains to be seen, doesn't it?
It does. But I want them
It's
both
up to
to have a
us.
future. I want them to have a future, but they
Hey.
have to change.
Love it.
And how do we change people? That's our mission.
Yeah. 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 Thank you so much. And so that really ties in, Jim, with the sense that change, that's an operative word right now. So we have this is opportune time.
Yeah.
It's opportune in many ways. Thank you, Jim. Oh my, good to see you.
Yeah.
Carry on. Keep these conversations going. And we will keep in our forefront, does religion have a future? Does Christianity have a future? And what kind of future would that look like?
Good.
Yeah, good for you. Thanks, Jim.
Okay, Bruce Robertson. Bruce, do you want to unmute yourself? Thanks.
Thank you. And following on Jim's question, first of all, deep appreciation for all you guys making this possible. Many, many blessings.
Thank you, Bruce.
I have, for me, an astounding question. Unbelievable. I'm here in Toronto and wondering why so many Christians in North America are supporting genocide. Unbelievable. How could it possibly have happened?
Yeah.
Mm.
And I will even broaden that question. Why is it that so many human beings support genocide? How? I mean, have we forgotten that we are one another? That I am you and you are me? And God, that sounds like a Beatles song, doesn't it? But it is a stunning question, and it shatters my heart to think we have to ask it. But genocide is and it's happening in so many places. So Bruce, I think this is part of what, if we have to we really do, in my opinion, have to rethink what it is to be human.
Mm.
And for me, a question is, do we really value it? Do we value this remarkable, maybe unbidden gift of being human? We didn't ask for it, but do we really value the remarkable fact that we exist at all and that we are, who are we? What are we? What's our possibility? What are we capable of? Heinous things and remarkable things. But yeah, I think we're calling the question on what is humanity?
Mm.
Mm. Mm.
And in a way, keep God out of it.
Yeah.
Until
Yeah.
we come to better terms with what does it mean to be human.
Yeah.
Anyway, Bruce, thank you.
Yeah.
Keep loving us and praying for us, Bruce, would you?
Indeed.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Kate Gibbs. Kate, can you unmute? We seem to have lost Kate. I don't know.
Are you
No.
That I put up my hand and it always happens quicker than I think it's gonna happen.
Hi, Kate.
Hi, Marianne.
Hi.
Hope your trip to China went well.
Yeah, the one to Japan went. It
So
was
it-
very,
yeah.
it was very, very, very interesting. Yeah, I feel very lucky that I could do it. Thank you.
Anyway, yeah, that was a good reflection. I definitely appreciate that, this different view of Christianity, and then we're talking about it, and that there is something different to learning about Jesus than the evangelical way of doing things. My favorite session was probably the last one, Marianne, the one before you, Jeff, but where you talked about taking the Bible, stored in the Bible as metaphor.
Yeah.
And we talked about Jesus walking on the water, and that being a metaphor. And it was funny because the week after that, we went to Florida. And in Florida, there's a sandbar. And so it was kind of like walking on the water. Because the water kept coming onto the sand. And anyway, so I did really like that. You are a very good listener to people, Marianne. I appreciate your patience. I did like it when we were talking to Dalton Lane, and about the spiritual and the animal world, and I mentioned something about Theo, and
Yeah.
I didn't know if it would quite match up with the topic, but I think you got a little choked up about it, and I ended up telling my friend that I got the wife of Marcus Board all choked up.
Yes, you have done that more than once.
But yeah, that was fun. That taught me that maybe I should just say whatever comes to my and but yes, thank you. You're always willing to listen and have great responses, and I really appreciate appreciate you and getting to know you. And
Yeah.
Jeff, I did listen to your May talk, and I was away in Banff, Canada, Alberta for
Uh-huh.
Mother's Day, but I went back and listened to it, and I appreciated your story about your wife and the thread. So thank you. I wish I was there for that one.
Mm.
Banff Springs was fun, but I wish I got to listen to it a little bit on that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Great.
thank you for this. I look forward to coming back in September.
Great, great. Well, I look forward to seeing you in September, Kate, and you've been a real gift to us. I'm just so glad you're part of this, and yeah, you've been a real gift. You've made some beautiful observations and contributions, so your presence it's part of what makes Second Saturday this heart space and tender space and illuminating space that it is. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
Yeah. So,
Sure appreciate you.
oh, okay. Well, naturally.
Linda.
Yes, I have put my timer on, so hopefully
Wow.
it can stay under
She's
2
probably-
minutes.
Yeah.
And I have written out what I want to say, so
Oh,
hopefully
Sunny.
be a little
Okay.
more succinct. This is such a balm to my spirit, and I really
You want to spell that for me, please?
B-A-L. Yeah, but I'm going to make a note of that and contemplate that. There's
Kind
some
of teasing you, Linda. Thank you.
I know, but I love it. I mean, I love being able to do that. And with Bruce, I ditto. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to give you a little bit of my story. Went to college in Washington, D.C. and met and fell in love with an Air Force JAG who would be going back to Oklahoma to join his father, who was also an attorney, and his mother was the legal secretary in an office in Lawton, Oklahoma. He is an only child. So there was a nice little threesome that I was not a part of. As an introvert, I was lost. We didn't become a part of a community of faith until we were expecting our first child. So the thing, bloom where you're planted, kept going on in my mind. But then and Joan Chittister had posted this, and then I looked it up, and there was another person who had authored it. Plant yourself where you can bloom. So
Wow.
where in the heck is that? After the general conference in 2019, I could not stay in my local church.
Yeah.
I knew of the church in Norman, Oklahoma, which is 90 miles away, and I joined, and I started going Sunday school church. Really, oops. Oh my God, my 2 minutes is up. Okay. Can I go just a little bit more?
Sure.
Okay. So I couldn't stay in the church where this still hurts, where I raised my children, and they had, really tried to raise me as well. I knew the church in St. Stephen's, and I knew the church of St. Stephen's of Norman, 90 miles away, not sustainable. When I was wrestling with where I belonged, Norman, Lawton. A chiropractor that I was visiting said, can you look at that as an affair versus a faithful marriage? And I thought, oh, good grief. The affair is shiny and new and stimulating, but no responsibility. And the other is home, but not quite as challenging. And so I am so extremely grateful to, I mean, this is, as I say, a BALM. To have this, I am having to find my sustenance, my stimulation outside my local church. And in fact, one of the members of our Sunday school class said, Linda, you're just ahead of your time. Well, damn it, this is the only time I have. What in the heck am I supposed to do? Settle or seek. And I've just got to seek. And so I'm just so extremely grateful that I have this place to be. So thank you all.
Yeah. Yeah, you're very welcome, Linda. And yes, thank you all. I mean, it's amazing. We're everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you are everywhere, you know? And so now we're finding each other and realizing that, you know, we're not alone, which is actually going to be that's the title of the closing music for today.
Oh,
Yes, no love, you're not alone.
oh, thank you.
But that's thanks to to all of the people who show up here. So they're kindred spirits everywhere.
Absolutely.
So, yes,
But they're everywhere rather than in Lawton, Oklahoma.
which I think is good news.
You know, I believe it is too. I believe it is too.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, bloom also where you're planted. So
Exactly.
bloom anyway. Bloom, Linda.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Lynn Tolk. Lynn, do you want to unmute?
There, I think I did. Okay. I got to echo everyone else in my gratitude for having found this place, a place where I feel safe to say whatever I want to say, and to hear such exciting, affirming, and stimulating things. I don't remember exactly when I found Second Saturday, but I'm very grateful for the friend who told me about it. The past year, and I've valued all of these talks, has been for me a very transformational year. And I think an increasing awareness of how life is transformation. That is what I'm doing.
Right.
And stop worrying about it and trying to understand it. I have a mind that wants to understand everything. And one of the things that I have learned this year is that I don't need to do that. I don't need to know anything.
Yeah.
In fact, it's fine going to the Buddhist sense of beginner's mind. It's fine to just let go and, okay, let's see what I can learn now.
Right.
I have learned to let go of a lot of things, including my need to be right. And I'm willing to back off and just make sure that I'm right. But no, that's not the same.
Yeah.
And in the process, I am coming to have closer friendships, more intimacy. It's just been fantastic. And I just wish that it could go on forever, but
It will.
well, yeah, maybe.
As
In
long
what
as we're here, it will. Yeah.
But anyway, thank you very, very much. Also, thank you for introducing me to Belden Lane. I had not encountered him before,
The
and
treasure.
his book is just magnificent.
The treasure. Yeah. Well, I love what you're saying, Lynn. And I think transformation, that is talking about being a human being. It's
Yeah.
about transformation. And I
Yeah.
dare say God is about transformation too. And one of the lovely things about theopoetics is that it doesn't explain.
Mm.
And, you know, sometimes I know that, you know, I think we feel like we have to explain ourselves or whatever. Not necessarily. You know, we don't always have to explain ourselves. So we're part of a deeper mystery than that. So, but anyway, here's to transformation. Great.
Yeah.
Great. Here's to being human. Thank you, Lynn.
Yeah.
Thank
Welcome
you.
aboard.
Pleasure.
Yeah, lovely.
That's-
And thank you also for saying what a safe place Second Saturday is. That's thanks to the people here on Second Saturday.
Yeah.
Time and time and time again, people, I mean, people bring their heart and vulnerabilities and curiosity and all of that in play here. But there's a kind of tenderness and a graciousness of spirit here that makes possible our exploration in the way that we do it.
Yeah, and that was what I got from the session Jeff led, where all of us contributed more than usual, and I got to hear from a lot more people, and I just like where I am.
Right. Yeah. Jeff gave the space and spaciousness to do that
Yes,
without
thank you.
cluttering up your minds like sometimes I do. But anyway, thank you, Lynn.
Yeah, Virginia.
Hey, here I am. Thank you very, very much, both of you. And I was fascinated by what you said about Gordon Kaufman. I must have missed that one. And I'll have to get his book. But I like the idea of God as creativity, except that I do it a different way. Sometimes I have to take a funeral here in Dublin, Ireland. And I'm always aware that there are people there who have been badly hurt by the church, who aren't churchgoers, and who are not going to easily relate to a funeral service. So the last one I did, I remember saying, look, I know we're all sorts of different people here with different feelings about faith and death and God and so on. And so when I say God, please don't think I'm talking about an old man in the sky who's going to zap you if you do something wrong. When I say God, what I have in mind is the creative love that holds us all in being, which is, I think, another way of saying God is creativity. So I'd just like to say that people find that incredibly helpful. And people who've dropped out of church come up to me saying, oh, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. That makes everything so much better. So that's one thing. I noticed when you were talking about Kaufman, you suggested that love and evil are human constructions. I'm not sure about that. And I'm even less sure about that we are evolving towards loving our enemy. I don't think there's much sign of that in the world today. In fact, I despair of our ever learning to love our enemy as societies. Just look at all the war, look at all the destruction. They say there are more people in the world than there ever were before, but there are soon going to be less because of all the horrific destruction and murder and genocide and so on and so forth. So I find it hard not to despair of the Jesus impulse, the incarnate love, managing to change this world, this planet. There are quite a number of well-meaning people who want to do that, but there are not enough. And so maybe we need to imagine even further when we look at how we're damaging the planet, how the planet is almost dying. Do we need to think about maybe that, you know, everything has an end, but creative love continues, and maybe there's something wholly new that will come about that we need to look to and pray for and hope for, because I'm beginning to lose hope for this planet. And yet I have to preach on Sunday week in Christchurch Cathedral. How am I going to help people, you know? So one more thing about not going to church. As a retired clergy person, I find going to my parish church quite difficult sometimes. One does tend to be a bit critical as a former clergy person. But there are ways around it. And that is to do other things as well. One thing that I do is I belong to a body in Dublin, which is an expression of a worldwide body called We Are Church. We meet online every fourth Sunday morning.
Interesting.
And we worship together. We have a Eucharist. It happened in the pandemic, but we continue. We have a Eucharist with everyone with their bread and wine on the little table in front of them. A different person is invited to create and lead the liturgy each week. And it will use the readings of the day, probably, but not necessarily anything anyone finds in a prayer book. The Eucharistic impulse is the same, but the words may not be. And it's very, very refreshing. And everybody is a Christian, but not a dogmatic Christian. And there's an invitation to imagination and so forth. And
well, for me, Virginia, that's hopeful. And what you've just described is creative love that holds us all in being. And that fourth Sunday group, it sounds like that. And it sounds like you may not be sure how it's all going to go, but you hold to that creative love. And
Mm.
I say for all of us, don't, as the Dalai Lama says, don't give up. Don't
That's
ever
right. No, we don't give up. Don't give up.
don't give up. So,
It-
so anyway, Jesus said, love your neighbor, love your enemy. That was radical, radical, radical. So
But we have
it's-
to.
exactly. So we're moving along, and let's hope we make it. But don't ever give
To
up on it.
love one's enemy, you have to begin to see what made them so horrible.
Yeah, it's complex. So
And-
Virginia, this is a conversation I look forward to continuing in September.
Okay.
We could sit and have tea and talk about this all afternoon.
And maybe we could begin to meet as Christians locally in somebody's sitting room or something and do it our way. I hate to think of people just saying, I'm done with church, I'm not doing
Yeah,
that
well, I
anymore.
love your model. I love what's working. I love what you're talking about. And it does talk about, and sort of what Jim High was saying, coming together and caring for one another.
That's right. That's
Caring
right.
for one another. And the early church, well, actually, it wasn't called church, but the early Jesus communities, they created a safe space to meet and talk in resistance to violence and empire.
Mhm.
Like there's
And
another way to
maybe the
violence and
future of the
empire.
church
And that's
is
what we're
going to-
doing here too. So
And maybe we're going to go back to being more like the New Testament early church.
possible. And your
Meeting
Fourth
together.
Sunday group is maybe
Yeah.
an example of that. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
carry on, okay? Lovely.
you.
Thank you, Virginia. Thank you.
Marianne, I just want to share something here from the chat.
Yes, thank you.
Jim Resch has put in this quote in response to what Virginia was saying.
Yeah.
Lament holds out for hope. Despair has lost hope.
Say that again.
Which is a quote from Cole Arthur Riley, who
Okay.
has a book called Black Liturgies. Lament holds out for hope. Despair has lost hope.
Okay.
I think that's an important distinction.
Yep. Yep.
Sue Lilly. Sue, can you unmute?
Thank you, Jeff, for that.
Oh, hi. Hi, so nice to be here and see you both. Thank you. I totally feel in my heart and agree that God is ongoing creativity in each moment, and also that God is infinite love that holds us all. That's a beautiful way to say it. I also love to sing. And it seems to me, I heard you say at the very end of your remarks, how does Christianity help us to sing a song? Did you say that?
I did actually. I think I did say that.
And could
We
you
sing a song in a
say
strange
more
land?
about
That's from the psalm. Excuse me. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear that.
No. Go ahead.
Well, I just wondered if you could say more about how Christianity helps us to sing a song, if that's what you said.
Yeah, it is. It's actually, I referenced a psalm that says, how do we sing our song in a strange land? And this was during the exile and so forth. How do we sing our song in a strange land? So I just, sort of riffed on that. But I think it's for us to figure out, okay, so what is this, do we hear the music? What is the song? What is the song? What is the song that might make our hearts glad? Or that the birds might join in? And if you're a singer, I give you a challenge. And then you can come and share it with us.
Well,
help us to sing our song in a strange land.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you bet.
Thanks, Sue. Yeah. Edward, do you want to unmute?
You still need to unmute.
There you go.
Hi, all.
Hi there.
Marianne. I want to go back to, I think the poem you referred to about God in the sky or whatever,
Yeah, the worst thing we've done.
Yeah, it really is. You see athletes doing that all the time, Yeah, Saturn, Jupiter, whatever. Uh,
Listen, every so often I look up too, so.
when you're really hurting,
Habits
yeah,
of the
right,
mind.
right. And I'm seeing, as we all are, a lot of people abandoning the church, disillusioned, bored. And I think it's because we have done that. We have put God, these things in the distance, even Jesus. I'm about to finish up a book called Is This the Jesus You're Looking For?
Oh.
And can you imagine Jesus, 12 disciples, 12 men sitting around a fire at night? Can you imagine what goes on? I mean, these are men, they're sitting around a fire. They're joking with each other.
This makes me think of Robert Bly and drumming circles.
There you go. There you go. Well,
but please, Ed, what were you thinking?
Well, some of it I can't really say, but they're joking, they're pulling tricks on each other. Sure, they're going over what they did in the day in the village. But when I see that picture, it makes it more real for me. It's not so distant, that I think we focus too much on the divine and not on the humanity of Jesus.
I agree.
And in the same way with God, my chapter that I'm writing on God, I've got a ad at the very beginning. It says mansion for sale, ornate gates coming into the mansion. The street's actually paved with gold blocks. This ivory mansion on the hill, an alabaster throne, dining hall
is our God.
Dining hall with velvet set seats for sale, and it's remote. If you like remote, it's really remote. And, it's for sale. I'll take any price. Signed, God. I'm going back to be with my people on earth.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we have to shake ourselves loose from a kind of piety that we've been, almost groomed to think is the right thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We're raised that way. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I
We
think
have time for one more.
I think what Edward did is a little deconstruction.
Yes.
That's excellent.
And I wonder if he'll get a commission if the mansion sells.
Oh, if
there we go.
Yes, we might have time for one more, and then we'll go to yes.
Yeah, Cheryl.
Brief close.
Hi there. I ran across a word listening to NPR, and it was about two women who'd been longtime friends. They ended up in a Greek Orthodox church in Jerusalem and discovered that they could have a ceremony that would bind them in friendship. And it's called Adelpho Poesis, making brothers. And I thought this entire thing that's been going on for years between all of us really creates that blessing. Adelpho Poesis, the making of brothers. I'm sure it developed, in the 600s when the communities started to form monasteries and people vowed to live together for each other's welfare. But anyhow, and this group epitomizes that. Thank you.
Well, yes, I think that's a beautiful description of the gathering here at Second Saturday. And poesis, the making of, theopoesis, making of, maybe the making of one. Maybe in a sense that's what we're doing. We're remaking. Yeah, God.
That's why I kept listening. Anyway, thank you.
Lovely. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, brief close. I want to draw some attention to the closing music that I'm going to share today. But let me just say that I've loved being with all of you and with this community, and it's sort of like I feel safe. I feel like that I belong here, which is great. most of my life, I've not felt like I belonged. So that's another story, but it's nice to know that I feel like I belong here. And I thank you for being with me and puzzling and wondering and exploring some things, and that we all share in the hope, I think, Virginia, you too, that we can have a future that will be better. That's part of what we're hoping for and living for. Let me say a little something about our closing music. It's from Jacques Brel, and it's called No Love, You're Not Alone. And it's a bit wistful. It's about a couple who have gone through difficult times, but I want to just pull out a couple of verses for you. I really like this. It is a kind of lament. So thank you, Jeff, for that, reading that from the chat. No love, you're not alone. It's all right if you cry. If things don't turn out, all we can do is try. No love, you're not alone. Don't let it get you down. I'll hold you for a while. No love, you're not alone. Come on, love. Come on. We've got each other now. That's got to be enough. Come on. Come on. We'll sit with birds and trees and sing for whom it pleases. Love, come on. We'll dance across the moon, turn midnight into noon, pour perfume on the breezes. Where nothing ever grows, where no one ever goes, in lands of storms and snows, we'll plant one burning rose, love. We'll do it if we can, love. We'll do it if we can. Come on, love. Come on. Come on. Come on. We'll plant one burning rose. Maybe a garden full. I'm so glad that we have found each other and that we come together, and that we will do so again on September 14th. Have a good summer. And a benediction that Mark and I have both used in our lives together. Life is short, and we do not have much time to gladden the hearts of those who travel the way with us. So be swift to love. Make haste to be kind. Thank you for this year. See you September 14th. And for those who can stay for coffee time, I'll see you in 5 minutes.